Good morning, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the annual REI RODE Annual Virtual Property Forum brought to you by Real Estate Investor and RODE and Associates. Our headline sponsor for the 2021 REI RODE Forum is Crossways Farm Village, South Africa's first contemporary new rural town. For those who don't know me, my name is Neale Petersen. I'm the founder of Real Estate Investor, South Africa's leading independent digital real estate platform for over 14 years, geared for investors, home buyers, landlords, developers, entrepreneurs, and property practitioners. And Real Estate Investors' omni-channel digital content platform, remag.co.za, our monthly Digimag, Real Estate Investor, and our weekly virtual events is delivered to you by our specialist team of journalists, content creators, industry, and marketing experts, all passionate about serving the South African real estate industry to real estate investors community of over 320,000 users. So on behalf of Real Estate Investor and RODE and Associates and our headline sponsors Crossways, it is my pleasure and honor to be your host and moderator for this virtual forum today. You know, there's a lot to be discussed, and I think certainly Dr. Mulder has given us some food for thought over there. So first of all, I just want to, I know Leon had some problems with load shedding. I mean, that's the big elephant in the room, isn't it? We heard a lot about Eskom and that kind of thing, which we'll probably get to right now. In fact, my first question to Nicky would be particularly on that. So it's wonderful having you on board. Thank you all for those insightful presentations. Thank you to our audience. You've really given us some really interesting stuff, juicy stuff here to work with. So first of all, I'm going to start off with you, Nicky. So he mentions ODEZ, and I think it's OODEZ, an electricity specialist and political analyst with knowledge of South African intelligence, shares a view that Eskom CEO Andre de Ruyter, who reports into Cyril Ramaphosa, badmouths the very company he's in charge of fixing, saying that he's flogging a dead horse, which is unacceptable. He says Ramaphosa is strategically running down Eskom. So his brother-in-law, Patrice Motsepe, can gain massively from renewable energy contacts. Also highlighting the risk that should electricity frequency of grid drop below 47 hertz in South African will be in a total blackout, losing all civility within 48 hours. They need to be rescued by foreign companies. He believes Cyril is actually captured by global elite. And I'm not going to just throw that all into your lap, Nicky. I'm going to ask the rest of the panelists also to also comment as well. Certainly poses interesting food for thought, a view not dismissed given the fickle nature of politicians. And OODEZ recommends that the best South Africans can do is to be patient with Eskom and to demand for a CEO that will not badmouth Eskom. He says Eskom infrastructure can be rescued. Now, he just wants your comments, and I'm going to actually ask not just your comments here, Nicky, but it is about the elephant in the room. It's about Eskom. Your views.
I think that the reality is that I'm not sure that he's bad-mouthing Eskom rather than he's just being honest. It is what it is. It is a mess. It's not just Eskom's generating capacity that isn't adequate, where we have power stations that are ancient and constantly breaking. And we've built 2 new power stations during the Zuma era that was, of course, just a vehicle for looting. And the engineers now say that they are essentially suboptimal and always will be. I think the estimates I last heard from the ministerial committee that investigated, structural flaws at Medupi and Kusile is that Medupi at best can operate at 60% of its installed capacity, and Kusile, the argument was that we'd be lucky if it hits 50% of installed capacity. So the reality is that Eskom operationally is an exceptionally poor company. It didn't come about overnight. It came about gradually over a very long period of time, but it is what it is. So as a CEO to go out, given the reality of the situation, a country that has lived with load shedding for a decade, knowing there will be more of that, I think it's very difficult to put a different sort of spin on it other than to try and be humble, try and be honest, and try and fix the situation. So that's how I would describe what he's been saying. And then in terms of, Eskom, we're going to be living with this for a long time. I think that is a given. At the same time, I think the only answer here is to deregulate, do it incredibly quickly. Renewable energy is what saved us. Load shedding would have been a lot worse was it not for that. So you need to roll it out faster. There's no good reason why there's 2 years or 3 year gaps between the point where you open for a bid window and the point where you appoint bids. We know that the construction time of renewable energy is a lot shorter. You can get it onto the grid a lot quicker. And then, of course, a big thing is also the actual distribution system. That's equally old. I live in a not at all fancy neighborhood in Johannesburg, old suburb of Kensington. And what's happening is because of load shedding, switching on and off, what essentially happens the moment they switch on, there's a surge in, of course, as everybody starts to draw power from the grid. And that distribution network is so bad that the next moment that implodes. So my response would be, listen, I can't speculate on who knows who. I don't know anybody and who benefits from what. But yes, we know there is a gravy train in place in South Africa. It's cost us very dearly. It's eroded our economic performance. And it's brought us to a fairly desperate place where we are now. Unfortunately, we're going to have to find ways around the electricity constraint. And for me, a good start to that is this 100 megawatts of embedded generation. This concession does make it possible for individuals, companies, and individuals to find a way around the electricity constraint. It doesn't change the fact that it's a cost to the company, but at the same time, power outages is also a cost to the company. So that's my view.
No, great. Thank you very much for that. Theo, do you want to maybe just add to that? I mean, 2001, Eskom was probably the leading power utility. In fact, I think they were voted 2001. Do you want to maybe just tag on to the whole sort of Eskom issue?
I'd like to make a contribution. I was in the fortunate position to be part of the scenario development team of Eskom in 1997. This is 24 years ago. And in that project, we submitted to the Eskom board at that time that we're going to run out of steam in 2006. That was based on economic growth of 3.5%, like we've seen from 1946 onwards. Luckily, the economic growth was lower, so it only caught us by 2008, in the same year as the global meltdown. It's funny. And the same year, of course, Jacob Zuma became president. So all of these things kind of came together. But Eskom knew exactly what's going on. They based all their planning on the fact that external people would come over, take over the mothballed generation stations, run them. But as we know with the ANC, their biggest single problem is implementing their own strategic decisions. That is a notorious problem. And at the moment, Andre de Ruyter, and I've got a lot of respect for his ability, I think he's trying to manage, like Nicky said, an organization that was run down to the rims, if I can use that expression, by Brian Molefe and Machele Koko. And they, of course, if you listen to them in front of Zondo, they're the heroes. Of course, you can't be a hero if you don't maintain. So I think we have 3 or 4 challenges, and I'll end with that. The first challenge, I think, is we're sitting on a gold mine, which is the Northern Cape. But we don't have enough grid or let's call it pipes to take the electricity that we can generate to where it's needed, Gauteng and a few other places. So a huge and a very urgent need to get more lines from the Northern Cape to the rest of South Africa. That addresses the grid story. Secondly, I think we need to move much faster in getting the privatization of Eskom in terms of the decisions that was already taken. And then lastly, I think the issue is the unbundling of Eskom, running the grid on one side and running the generation on another side, and then to get the politicians out of managing this huge machine. I think statements by politicians at the moment are not very helpful. If you've got a national issue like we have, I mean, I talk to you while I can hear faintly in the background my generator running. But this is how we do it. So that would be my contribution.
Thank you, Theo. I think great contribution there. So, Dr. Mulder, I'm going to bring you in over here. You're self-sustaining, and I think you gave a powerful argument over there. I think your goal is really to be off the grid and be off the grid living. Is that a reality? I mean, just share what can be done. Already we heard Theo say the Northern Cape. There's opportunity over there. You're sitting in the Eastern Cape. So let's just tag on to this whole electricity Eskom thing and self-sustainability for developments.
Thanks, Neale. Our ROD and our approval stated that we cannot expect any services from the local municipality or the regional municipality. So we knew from the start that we had to become self-sustainable. And so we started our own sewer works, constructed wetland, which is no technology, but it's in fact so easy to do that and reharvest the water. And if you start with some of our guidelines that everybody has to harvest rainwater, everybody in this place has to have a couple of rainwater tanks. It's mandatory. And because we harvest the rainwater, and because our stormwater management is designed in such a way throughout every single village we do, there's not a single stormwater pipe in this village. We harvest by swales and surface drainage to decent stormwater planning, and we channel the water back to the dam that you see in the background. So first of all, and then we have, fortunately, we've got 120 hectares under permanent pivots and irrigation. We have authorized water rights. We have extraction rights out of the Van Stadens River, and the water is very clean. And we can clean some of that water up. We can make it potable. So that's what we've done. We've installed our own sewer plant. We have our own substation. We still buy from Eskom like a municipality, but we're busy with the new technology is so mind-boggling that it doesn't really bother me. In the next year, we will get inverters. The new inverters are, with the lithium-ion batteries becoming cheaper all the time, better all the time. We can install an inverter if we want to in every home now in the future for people who want to do it. And it's going to be cheaper because we don't have to install the electrical grid system that in the old conventional townships have to do. So we are going to build the first 2 houses now with inverters. I've got an inverter here in my little office, but that's just like an old type inverter, not an old type, but not as practical as the new inverters are. So that means our reticulation can be different, our stormwater can be different. We can have solar power, we can have water power, and the new technology is so great that I'm happy that it can be done easily and in many other places as well. We are busy helping people, giving advice to people who wants to develop a rural village. We're happy to invite, we're happy to share. We're on a learning curve as we still speak. In spite of what we've got approved 10 years ago, we're on a learning curve now, and I'm very excited to see what's going to happen.
So, so we need to understand you cannot be wealthy without electricity. That is just not an option the laws of economics allow. And if you have lots of electricity, you tend to be wealthy. Now, I'm not suggesting, of course, as an economist, that it is the determinant of prosperity or GDP or growth, but it is a precondition, not a sufficient condition. Secondly, my experience with him has always been good. Whenever I've had dealings with the portfolio committee, the department, the various ministers, my own personal relationship goes back to before transition the Mandelas and the Committee of 10 and so on. So I've been very close. I've never been in any political party, never identified with any, but I work with all the political parties, as you said. And my dealings have been always good. They've understood the logic, the sort of thing Theo had said, and Nicky, but they just didn't do it. Now, you might know there was a white paper years ago, I forget the date, which said that Eskom should not build any more power stations at all because 30% was going to be provided privately onto the grid. And the biggest electricity companies in the world came to South Africa, opened offices, I met with them, and they were ready to invest and generate. And then NERSA, the energy regulator, imposed all sorts of conditions that they all said, no, they're not willing to, and they basically closed their offices and left, with one or two exceptions in the nuclear field, hoping that eventually that would be unleashed. And so this 100 megawatt concession is not a concession. All over the world, the norm in the world now is energy trading. Everywhere in the world, there is energy trading in any significant economy. We are living with a Neanderthal system that really was abandoned by planet Earth long ago. You cannot be a member of the European Union without freedom of energy trade. People in Poland can sell electricity to people in Spain and in fact do so. And in New Zealand, the government runs advertisements asking people to choose between suppliers, as they do in some states in America. So this deregulate is long, long overdue. And why the ANC has kept various apartheid dinosaurs like this going, I just don't know. It is completely yesterday's idea and technology, state monopoly, generator, provider, transmitter of power. So what we need is for people to be able to generate and trade power almost immediately. That what you have to have is a separated, unbundled grid operator, but you don't even need a grid. You can have local distribution. One of the mining houses I can't name consulted us and me, and I was involved. They wanted to generate their own power to supply to themselves, but they had to transmit it a long distance. Eskom would charge them ridiculous amounts for the grid. They said, well, can they then build their own mini grid? And they were not allowed to. NERSA said, no, they wouldn't get a license. You know, who was it who said, I think it was somebody, Chris maybe, who said, or was Erwin, he could hear his generator in the background.
Yeah, they were
very few people know that even that generator under the existing law is actually illegal. The law says you may not generate your own power until this 100 concession comes in. So it's not just not implementing policy, it's that the policy flip-flops. It's like a yo-yo. It turns around. There's a new turnaround strategy, a new turnaround strategy. People in Eskom are far too dizzy after all this turning around to know what they're doing. And so we should, and there's renewables provide power when the wind blows and the sun shines, as we know. And the only other way that is environmentally friendly and green, of course, is nuclear. And there's lots of mythology about how much it will cost up front and who will pay. Well, so what? Just allow people to build their power stations and trade. You know, we don't need Eskom to decide what the price is or what size to build. And then Medupi and Kusile have been mentioned. They are absolutely scandalous. It was known before they started that they would never produce power up to their theoretical capacity. It was not even clear that they would produce any power at all. And the price went up from, you know, the very first price and figures named were like 29 billion or something. I mean, that's the sort of loss they make per month at the moment. The whole thing is extraordinary. So my view is, I agree with Nicky, you deregulate and there is no reason to delay. It can be done as it was with airlines, with broadcasting, overnight. Just allow people to invest and enter the following day. It takes them time. They have to do planning. They have to raise capital. They have to get bank support and investors and so on. So it's not as if they will operate overnight. But so long as people can sell power immediately to each other. Now, this hearing of generators, I'm in a building right now where there's a generator running downstairs. That's where I had to come to. And so the point is that this building may not sell power to the neighboring building. You can't have one. Banks in Santon, they wanted to build one central generator for all of them to have 24-hour reliable power. They were not allowed to. So the point is the laws, the regulations are so wacky, so crazy. I want to meet these people and have a chat and a drink over coffee and say, what were you thinking? It's as if there's a kind of collective madness that has gripped everyone involved with energy, right from not understanding that energy is an absolute precondition for growth and prosperity. There is no other way to get there. You must have it. You must also have base load. That's important. Now, my view is, for the time being, we're stuck with coal, and we should not have this this anti-coal thing. We should have pro-power wherever it comes from. And it should be, and it should be nuclear is, you can build small nuclear power stations in 5 years or so, and then they're not, and we don't have to pay for them. Eskom doesn't have to pay for them. You just need to allow it. And so the first thing to do is ask the government, this is what it should do. Here's the government's plan. I've got a blueprint for it. It must do nothing. Start by doing nothing. Just get out of the way. And the power problem will be solved pretty quickly. Even the renewables, let them trade, let them privately sell to people who run batteries, who need them, like banks. Banks must have 24-hour power. Hospitals must. Supermarkets must have power during trading hours. They will buy from renewables, from coal, from gas, from methane, from, if it's available, hydro, etc., etc. So I'm sorry to rant on like this when all of you have been having a nice little chat. But if I may say that the other one was the mothballed power stations. Now, people have forgotten that we had too many power stations in the 1990s. They were mothballed. I don't know how many of you ever visited a mothballed power station. I did. They had been ransacked. They had been random. Everything was stolen, was gone. They were a wreck. They were like a war zone. The houses people would live in were all ransacked. So the mothballed power stations were not mothballed. They were actually supposedly protected and secured, but in fact never did. And many of them, not all of them, some of them just became completely ransacked and denuded and had literally no generators. Cables were gone, houses were gone, even things like swimming pool tiles were stolen.
Yeah.
It was incredible. So,
Right,
so the answer is simple. Do nothing.
Oh, okay. Hurry up and wait. Okay, Evan, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you in here because I want to move away from the Eskom, because this is going to turn into a power conference, as opposed to a property forum. So maybe just your closing thoughts. There is a comment here from Lynn Shane. It says, Evan, you are usually pessimistic. Why are you consistently more optimistic compared to the IMF? So maybe just your comments just to close on the electricity issue related to property and that kind of stuff. And then just your comments to Lynn before we get back to the whole property narrative.
Yeah, that's an old misunderstanding. In fact, I made the point in my presentation is that we have two scenarios. The one we call the base case scenario, and the more pessimistic one we call the IMF scenario. It's not the scenario by the IMF, it's our scenario. We are more pessimistic than your average economist. So we're just giving the worst case scenario in case things go really all right.
Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to shift more to there's a lot of questions that we need to try and get through. We are going to run over a little bit of time. And Nicky, I'm going to bring you here. It was to you. It was from Trevor Hosiowski. And he said, please, Nicky, can you elaborate? And I'll also ask Evan, because he so nicely gave us his breakdown of what's happening in the commercial market and the different sectors. Please elaborate why you believe the commercial property market will be subdued. And I think Evan did touch on that, but you want your comments just from economist perspective?
Yeah, I think that the main reason we're saying that it will be subdued is because of where we find ourselves at the moment. So the reality is I'm at the office today. A crazy notion is that I knew there was going to be load shedding, and so I came into the office to get power and to make sure that I can chat to all of you. But yeah, I can tell you that we've got a couple of new shopping centers here around Nedbank and Sandton, and there's no foot traffic. And a lot of the shops that they were rented out to had shut down, and it's empty. Near where I live, that's very much a similar story. All the shopping centers, you find a situation where on a given floor, 50% have got vacant space that no one's renting. And I think that's a function of the pandemic. It's a function of the change in people's behavior, and it's especially the function of the way companies are approaching working. So we've got these new ways of work. It's spread across South Africa. Many firms, including banks, which you would have thought may have forced things like dealers to come in, anybody working on any confidential contracts. But technology has made it possible that wasn't necessary. And in many cases, I know at Nedbank, this switch has become permanent. So they're going to work on the basis of 60% of the staff on campus and 40% not. So that immediately means there's going to be less demand for office space. From a retail perspective, I think it really much depends on where the shopping center is situated. Nedbank Corporate would tell you that interestingly enough, in your rural areas, small shopping centers doing exceptionally well. In your urban areas, we've had difficulty. We really have seen the strain. If you don't have an anchor tenant, that's very difficult from the retail side. So that's been the experience that Nedbank's had. And I just don't think all of this is going to go away. I think the pandemic has changed behaviors. It has rapidly accelerated digitization, and that's going to become a permanent part of the way people work and the way people shop, and the way people go about their economic affairs. And the outcome of that is probably going to affect commercial property more than residential property. And that's essentially what we're saying. It could go a little bit better if we can get people vaccinated quickly. But clearly, on that front, we're moving very slowly. So with that in mind, we're going to have to deal with this for longer than maybe we would otherwise have had to.
Okay, great. So I think it's sensible insights there. Makes all adds up together. And Theo, I'm going to bring you in here. I'm going to take a little bit of a swing because you were going to deal with the whole EWC, expropriation without compensation. And it's a question from Jeremy that's directed to you, Jeremy Wiley. And he said, is expropriation without compensation a real crisis in South Africa, or just self-defeating political bluster? And should South African property owners and investors, including farmers, ignore the noise, look for fair value, and continue to invest regardless? Your thoughts, Theo, and we'll welcome comments also from the rest of the panel as well.
Neale, my answer would be your last sentence. I'll never forget being at Nasrec when this decision was taken, expropriation without compensation. It was taken very late at night. The same evening, Cyril Ramaphosa was elected, and then they had this special meeting of the Economic Committee of the ANC, and like in 2 o'clock in the morning, they were fighting it out about expropriation without compensation. And the RET forces at that stage were better organized than the CR forces, because the CR forces were having a party because they just won the ANC's presidency, and they didn't attend the committee in the numbers that they should have. So that's a little bit of the background. The next morning at 9 o'clock, the man that is now our Minister of Finance, that will present his first mini budget today, he got up at the press conference and he said, okay, this decision was taken, but this decision can only happen if it does not impact on the economy, if it doesn't impact on agriculture and food security, at 4 reasons like that. So my comment in the newspapers then was, okay, the ANC took a decision which they don't want to implement. So we will watch the next 2 to 3 years kicking for touch, like we know in rugby so well. And sometimes when you kick for touch, the ball goes out directly. Sometimes it bounces first before it goes out. All of those kind of options is open. And the EFF got to them first by suggesting a motion in Parliament that kicked off the whole process over the last 2 years. As we speak today, the biggest problem of establishing coalitions is that the ANC fear that if they go into coalition with the EFF in a too formal way, the EFF will in Parliament force them to retract on their current position. Because currently, if I take the position about expropriation without compensation in review, what we've got a new expropriation bill, which isn't yet signed, which is a good one because it consolidated all the different pieces of legislation into one. But we don't have the change of Article 25 yet. And I think that one is a serious kicking for touch. The ANC is looking for a Frans Steyn among their midst to see if they can kick this thing as far as possible, because they know economically it's going to create, in an already suppressed business climate, it will do more. My personal view is that we will see this ongoing debate and all kinds of issues, but I do not see the Constitution doing what the ANC said they will do, and that is to make more specific what is said in that article. I think the terms was to make, I'll get the term right now, but they wanted to be more specific in terms of what was actually meant by that article, and the input they got from several academics and people working with expropriation and working with legislation said, you're in a corner. You can't get out of this. Either you do it or you don't. And if you do it, the impact will be severe. It will go across several sectors of the economy. It's not only property that will be under threat. So under the current leadership of the current president, they utilize the language. They, from time to time, repeat the kind of political statements. But there's no urgency to do these things. And so in my view, I think the noise will continue, but like with electricity, the question here is, if the ANC couldn't implement the arrangements like Leon also showed, what gives us the impression that they will be able to implement expropriation without compensation, even if they take the decision?
Okay, great. And I see there's a lot. Nicky, I'm going to get to you. Leon, I think you put your hand up first, and then Nicky, I'll give you an opportunity to respond thereafter. So Leon, over to you.
Yes, property has been my lifelong obsession since I was a young Marxist in the late 1960s and was puzzled. And my conversion to being a free market libertarian, by the way, was not reading some great philosophical treatise by Hayek or Milton Friedman or whatever, but by thinking with my communist fellows in our cells, and we were part of the underground. I don't understand why they're complaining about apartheid, because apartheid is 100% Marxist. State owns all the land and the people live on government land. So do they want for whites what we had for blacks, or do they want for blacks what we had for whites? And right at that very early stage, I could never get a coherent answer on why they wanted to have communism when in fact apartheid was communism for most people. Elimination of class, state ownership, whatever. So that's, I've been very much involved. I created the Kaya Lam project, which is a fabulous project that is privatizing and giving title deeds over tens of thousands of properties to Black South Africans. My view is that if all of the 8 to 10 million parcels of land held, not owned, held by Black South Africans become owned by them, there will be 3 times more Black property owners than white owners, and this whole talk about whites having the land and redistribution of land will just disappear. It will become self-evidently lunatic when the majority of deeds in the deeds office are in the name of Black people. So it's really very easy to solve. It's pretty close to, it's 2,600 Rand, issue a title deed that is worth nearly $500,000 on average. And we're talking about 1.5 trillion Rand, according to FNB. That is an entire annual budget's worth of dead capital already in the hands of Black people. So all we want to do is give them title deeds, and we have some exciting projects doing that. That's that. The next thing is that there was an act called the let me just rewind. My view of expropriation without compensation, it is a very serious threat. But I agree with Theo, not to white people, not to rich people. They should just relax. Their land will never, if one commercial farm is taken in the next 10 years, I will be astounded. If one house in Bryanston or Constantia is taken, I will be astounded. But a lot of land will be taken. And we need to understand whose land that is. And the answer is the poor. When they want to extend a city park, who expropriates? It's not the president. It's not the Minister of Land Affairs. It's thousands of local government officials who expropriate. They expropriate to make parks and build schools and clinics and extend roads and put in infrastructure and so on and so forth. Who do they expropriate? They expropriate by the thousand the land of poor people because they don't have title. So they can take land in rural areas and Sowetos of townships and settlements, which they do by the day, by the thousand, without compensation. So expropriation without compensation is happening in South Africa on a massive scale right now. So what we need to do is to actually get those people to own their land so it can no longer be expropriated without compensation.
Nicky, you wanted to add to that. You stuck your hand up before. Do you want to just also comment on that too?
No, I don't. On the specifics, I think that's a very interesting and very thorough sort of layout of the dilemma South Africa faces, and sometimes of how decisions are made that sound like they serve the people, but in practice, really, they don't. For me, it's just a case of, even though I also think that as long as you have the ANC in charge, there will probably be a reluctance to expropriate without compensation in any sort of meaningful or destructive way. But the reality is that I think it still costs us. We've just come out of a decade where we've had house prices fall and you know, to very low levels. We have had interest rates come down to also historically low levels. You've had banks that have been more than willing to extend credit, but the only thing that has been missing has been demand. So if you have those sorts of price signals where property is affordable and seem to be really good value, and credit is equally cheaper than it's been for decades and decades in South Africa, and you still have such a modest uptake in the demand for property, then there is something more going on. And I think that expropriation without compensation, regardless of whether it will happen or won't happen, will be executed or won't be executed, the psychological impact it has is significant. It just tells people, don't buy, wait, rent. Your liability is less because you just don't know what's going to happen in the future. So I think that's the problem with it. And equally from a foreign investor perspective, why take on that uncertainty if you can go elsewhere and you don't have to? So it's the opportunity cost. Is that what you can't measure? It's people that would have bought something had there not been this uncertainty.
Okay, great. Nice diverse views over here. Dr. Mulder, I'm going to bring you in here because you definitely didn't take the advice of, disinvesting out of South Africa. In fact, you're one of the farmers that ignored the noise and you just went ahead and you created fair value and you invested regardless.
Yes, thanks, Neale. I think I want to get on to what Theo said a while back. I think for us, it takes a positive and constructive mindset to continue. and a positive mindset. That's why we here in the rural South Africa, and I keep on promising that. The places where I tried to do this was every time was close to what can I call it, a removed or an impoverished village all along the N1 and the N2 in this country. I tried at Curland, 7,000 people next to the N2. Did the same thing 10 years ago. The answer is no, you're outside the urban edge. I tried at Renendal, outside Knysna, 11 kilometers outside of Knysna, 7,000 people living there. No, you're outside the urban edge. I tried at Montague. No, you're outside the urban edge. And the only place that I then turned to the Eastern Cape, and there's a village of Thornhill, 3,000 people next to the N2, 30 kilometers from PE, 30 kilometers from Jeffreys Bay. And I said, I'm going to make this work here. We embroiled took the community of Thornhill in meetings way when the EIAs were busy and we had to consult. And we created a trust. We said we created trust. It's working. 2.5% of every sale we do go into the trust. There's trustees from the community, trustees from us. I made it further, every single title deed on this development. If you live here for 10 years, you buy an empty stand, you build a house, and you live here for 10 years and you die or you go away or you divorce or whatever, in the title deed, embedded in the title deed, you will pay 0.5% of that sale, of the increased value to the trust. So what I've hoped to do, created an ongoing income for the community forever. Looking at big developers that we were involved with, normally % of a development sells every year. If 10% of these sales turn around every year, is going to be 60, 70, and multi-million, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million houses, 0.5% goes into the community trust. But that's not all. If we have positive and constructive mindset, our street lights here, we harvest the wood on the site. I've got one guy from Thornhill, a carpenter, he makes the wood piece of the lamp. Another guy takes steel and footing, he welds the steel footing. Another guy, and he takes a concrete wheelbarrow, a empty paint can, he pours concrete, he puts a steel footing, he makes the footing of the lights. Another guy puts it together, and we only buy the little LED fitting. We could have said, it's too much hassle. We can import 400 street lights for the first phase from Europe or from England or from anywhere, but then it's gone, it's out the country. Now I've created 4 little small subcontractors, very proud of themselves, making street lights almost every 6 months for us. And if we can beam our fiber that we've got now, because we're fortunate, the fiber from Durban to Cape Town runs through the property. We had to assist the fiber people over the bridge of the Van Statens River and get them away leave, and we got tap-off point. So we've got dedicated fast fiber onto the site. We can beam that fiber into Thornhill, only 2 kilometers from here. Then I can create Wi-Fi accessibility for school children and children in the Thornhill community. And so the thing goes on. That's what I call positive and constructive mindset. So if you think out of the box and you think what you can do, and my passion, I said, I'm limiting my view to rural South Africa. There's so many opportunities. If I look at the tribal chiefs who consulted with us, say, can you do a village for us? Yeah, but then you must give title. We've discussed it. It's no use. The tribal chief sitting with the land and the people living there has got no title. And I just want to say, I always tell the people, come and take skin in the game. If you want to generate power, we will make a deal with you and we'll buy incrementally power as we grow. Come and grow with us and provide power. There's solar opportunities, there's these opportunities, batteries and everything there. And we can together show what can be done. And that to me is all about it's a positive criticism. Positive and constructive criticism. Criticism is not bad if it's constructive and it's positive. It can't be bad. And I think that's where we have to go. And that's where I've devoted the rest of my time to do.
Excellent. So how I'd like to end off is I'd like to do a roundtable with all the panelists, because it's been robust discussion. We moved obviously in the direction of Eskom and energy and the problems and EWC, and certainly from a property investment perspective, I think there's some very powerful arguments put through and sensible from Nicky Weimar from Avon, and obviously Chris Mulder on the property side of things. So I'd like to give you each, if I could say, 3 minutes to close, and I'm going to start off maybe with you, Nicky.
I think that where are we sitting at the moment? In a much better place than we were this time last year. So I think that is at least encouraging. We have still got to deal with COVID-19. We still have a very long road ahead of us in terms of getting the bulk of the adult population vaccinated. And therefore, that means that some form of lockdown, some form of social distancing, of health protocols will be part of our lives, and it will affect economic activity going forward. At the same time, we're a long way from solving our electricity crisis. And as Leon pointed out, electricity, unfortunately, not really a luxury. It's a necessity if you want to grow. So yes, we've rebounded from the worst of level 5 lockdown. Activity has normalized. Government has gotten smarter in how it applies lockdown measures, but this remains an immediate challenge for us. So I would just encourage everybody out there, if you care about the economy, if you care about job prospects, go out there, vaccinate. So that, I think, is the short-term issue. In the longer term, there are many challenges we face, and the biggest one is probably electricity. And the answer is, I think, definitely there in the market. The market can solve that problem. Government just need to trust them enough and give them the room and the space to do so. But it does mean, with these sorts of constraints, that our growth is probably going to moderate, but we still see some growth going forward. So that's where I'll end it. It's therefore a mildly positive outlook.
Wonderful. Nicky Weimar, Chief Economist of Nedbank, thank you very much. I think it was wonderful having on the panel. So Dr. Venter, it's over to you.
I tend to agree that there are some positive elements that we can focus on. My concerns are the issues that we will hear later today about the government's 3-year rolling plans, how they see. I think they will tell us that they currently have a lot of benefit from the growth in especially the markets, the mining and agriculture is playing a role. But my concerns politically is next year. In 2022, the ANC will have to choose a new leadership. Currently, they only have a top 5, so they'll have to add 1 to be the top 6 again. And I think the noise, the political noise next year will be fairly aggressive in terms of where the ANC is going. And if I read the signs correctly, some of these guys that are currently designated RET, Radical Economic Change, will stay out of active politics because their court cases won't be finished soon. Maybe they'll stand over until 2023. So in that sense, I think the intensity of the political scene will increase towards October and November next year. And it, of course, will impact on the business climate. I think the economy is going to slowly but surely mend and start growing, but not at the level that we would like. But I'm still concerned about the negative impact of uncertainty created by politics. A good news for me, and I differ with a lot of my fellow analysts, I think it's good that the ANC has dropped its national support to about 46%, so that we get a sense of more competitiveness in politics. And that's an issue that I feel the smaller parties are far better placed to get the advantage. And the ANC will have to sort out its own creation, and that is KZN. KZN is going to stay a big problem towards the end of next year, because KZN represents 25% of all ANC branches. So if Cyril Ramaphosa wants to get re-elected, and he does that without KZN on his side, then he will have to get that support somewhere else. So that is a major challenge, and maybe that explains why we have in cabinet somebody like Minister Tsele that would not serve in any other cabinet anywhere in the world. But here with us, he serves because he represents that small impact that Ramaphosa has in KZN. So economically and otherwise, I feel fairly positive. Politically, I'm a little worried about how we're going to deal with next year. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Theo Venter of Northwest University. Thank you very much for your contribution today. Leon Louw, would you give us your closing thoughts, your parting shots, please? And leave somebody with a go forward.
Yes, I'm probably the ultimate optimist here, and Nicky, I don't know if she's still with us, but probably not. And I am, of course, worried. There's lots wrong in the country. We all know it all. We read about it every day, and there's a huge amount of pessimism. But I do at least want to say that in the big dark cloud, or around the big dark cloud, is a silver lining. So let me just look at the silver lining for a moment. And that is, you can literally visit the Department of Stats SA, and look at any index you wish. Choose an index: life expectancy, square meters of housing, diet, literacy rates, anything of GDP, sale of building materials, whatever it is. And sort of thing that Dr. Mulder is doing, a fabulous work. And I really want to see if I can connect with him in some way to help there. But look at any statistic and you will see things improving. The size of the middle class, which is now, there's a bigger black middle class than the entire white population. Every statistic shows improvement. So there is a lot that's good that's happening, and it's not very easy to see because of all the chorus of pessimism. I don't want to debunk that. I want to acknowledge that there's serious stuff, but I do at least want us to observe that there's an enormous amount of positive news. Literally every index that is published measuring the quality of the environment, the human life, animals, endangered species, conservation, everything shows objective improvements by every measurable index. And then just one anecdote. Those of you who ever travel through Bosbokrand, Bushbuck Ridge, which everyone avoids, they go around Hazy View instead if they're going to the open gate. Go through Bosbokrand. The older ones of us will remember when it was mud huts and pigs and goats and muddy roads. You go through there now, there are thousands of middle-class houses. It is the biggest residential area in South Africa, by the way, on Google Maps. And you see, and it's what I call research by looking. Things are improving for many, many people, and we should at least be thankful for that.
Wonderful way to end off, Leon. Thank you. Thank you, Leon Louw, founder of the Free Market Foundation. Thank you very much for your contribution today. We hope to see you next week. I'm going to ask Dr. Mulder to finish, and Evan, you can have the last word, and you can maybe do a little bit of a wrap-up of everybody. So, Dr. Mulder, your final thoughts, your closing parting shots?
Not shocked me, but really it was amazing to see post-COVID. This thing was designed 10 years ago, 5 years ago, later on revised again. And post-COVID, all of a sudden, because of some things that happened, like the fiber and like the social distancing and like the mountain biking and hiking and open living, we now get requests from Europe. Well, you're living in a small new town, you've got fiber, you've got social distancing, you've got all, and I, my goodness, this is, I didn't know it at that time. I must admit, I didn't know it at the time when I went for this, that this COVID could have such a potentially meaningful impact on what we're doing here. And people said, now if you convert to euros, and what a European person looking for a small village where they can work from home, 30 minutes from the airport on a double-lane freeway, and they can work from home next to a fantastic school. And they said, well, I can come and work there and live there and buy there and live there for 4 months. For what? 150,000 euros? You must be kidding. And you know, that's the value of the monetary value of the rand versus what we can offer here as a smart village. And I'm just saying, I'm going to sit here and develop this smart village and then maybe show the president he's can do a smart city, but come and look at a smart village. That's, if I've done that, then I've fulfilled my mission. Thank you very much for the invite, and we were proud and happy to be sponsoring. And anybody that's interested, I'm happy to share for what it's worth any knowledge or any help or any assistance we can give.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Mulder. It was fantastic. I mean, I've been to Crossways twice. That's incredible work that you've done there. Thank you very much for being our sponsor and your contribution today, and for the work you're doing and for the work that you have done. And I'm just amazed that somebody at your age has all the energy out there, just doing all amazing things and driven. So thank you very much. I think it's fantastic. I think you really are building that dream. And on that note, I'm going to ask Erwin to give us the final word, to give us the final wrap, your final thoughts there, Erwin. As I said to everybody, we are going to pass the questions that were unanswered. We'll bring it onto the show next week. So Erwin, your closing parting shots.
Yeah, well, as you would have expected from me, I'm not going to be all that rosy and optimistic. My daughter is living in Canada, and I didn't influence her. The problem with South Africa is we've got too few taxpayers, and I always say it's like a boat on the River Congo, and it's got the 1914 engine powering it, and more people are jumping onto this boat. And that's the basic problem, the fundamental problems South Africa is facing. And no matter who governs this government, this country, it's a problem that will not go away easily. I would also like to add that the good indicators that were quoted by Louw, of course, they were on the back of huge debt, making huge debts, and which is not sustainable. So my final conclusion is, looking 10 years into the future, say, for what it's worth, I think we all look back to 2019 or maybe 2020. And we will say that was the turning point, and South Africa economy had a structural break in 2020. We are on a much lower growth path now, and the sooner valuers out there, and I'm talking about property valuers, start putting that into their models, the more accurate the evaluations will be. Forget about 6% growth in cash flows from a property that is aging and that is in the CBD, no matter where, in fact. I know property is very location specific, but as a generalization, the tough times are ahead. Sorry, guys. That's it.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Erwin. I think, the big mindset thing that was brought up earlier, I think is very important as well. And I mean, I would like to end off with an inspirational quote from previous US President Abraham Lincoln, and maybe also a message to our government, who said, "I'm a firm believer in the people. If given the truth, they can be depended upon to meet any national crisis. The great point is to bring them the real facts." And I think we can maybe take away something from that particular statement. So once again, I'd like to thank you to all our expert panelists and to our sponsors, Crossways Farm Village. Thank you for your contribution. I think it's really been great discussions. Stay safe and successful investing. That is Neale Petersen of Real Estate Investor signing out.